All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Mark here from Avalaunch. We're back with another project overview. Today, we are joined by the Deepwaters team. The Deepwaters team is building a really interesting DEX with a really unique, interesting architecture and vision, and super excited to talk about it with you guys today. We're joined by Michael, Zorrik, and Greg. Really a pleasure to have you here and talk about the project and kind of let our community in on sort of the deeper technical underpinnings of what you guys are building. So really happy to have you here. And I think it'd be cool just to kind of go through and start with a bit of a background on each of you. Greg, maybe we can just kind of start with you and Zorrik and then Michael. Just sort of who you are and what you were working on prior to Deepwaters and how it led you here. I just think that kind of historical context is always really interesting.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'll get started. I'm Greg, CTO at Deepwaters. Traditional background in education and engineering, over 10 years, primarily in control systems, software development, and rapid prototyping. The fun fact about me and the way I got into this space is actually because in a past life, I was a pro poker player, and that's how I discovered Bitcoin the first time. So one thing led to another. I eventually, got a hold of the white paper and had the, the aha moment that you get when you finally understand Bitcoin for the first time. Started a small mining operation with a friend of mine up in Washington State. He had access to cheap hydroelectric power and became pretty early into Bitcoin, Ethereum, a few of the early ICOs. And from there, just started getting into the space more and more every year until I eventually went full time. So that kind of leads me to where I am with Deepwaters. And I think this is the most exciting project I've ever been involved in. And just we have a killer team.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about poker and gambling. That I think it's just sort of the systems and the odds and the numbers, but it's a very common overlap with Bitcoin and crypto. So it's not interesting, but surprisingly common. Okay, cool. Thanks, Greg. Zorrik, what about you?
Made a career, I suppose, out of disrupting the status quo quite a few times, and somehow every time it was during these apocalyptic events. Here I am doing it again. I started my career at IBM, very corporate, but that didn't last. I wanted to kind of strike out on my own, and in the last 26 years, I created 8 startups. Besides the orders, and 2 of them were sold to the largest publicly traded entities of their kind in their respective industries. I also done some work with the military. I was a sole architect and designer of military satellite alternative system. Was used by U.S. Coast Guard, Taiwanese Navy, Egyptian Navy. I also ran 25 traders as a quant for my own hedge fund. And here I am again with the orders, and it's definitely the love of my life. And I hope to share this with you.
Very cool. Thanks, man. And what about you, Michael?
Thanks. Zorrik, by the way, is our fearless leader and CEO. Too humble to say so, but he's the guy we all look to. But yeah, I'm Michael Callahan, the Vice President of Marketing here at Deepwaters. A little unique as a marketer. I actually have a degree in engineering, believe it or not. I started my career working for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in NASA, so I'm the official Deepwaters rocket scientist. Got into Web3 about 6 or 7 years ago. I've worked all around the space. If you're familiar with Open Zeppelin, the leader of smart contract auditing, they had an outgrowth JV last year called Forta. I ran product and marketing for that launch. I've also worked for the Transform Group, WonderKind Media, the OKX exchange, and I actually had a pretty significant hand in writing quite a lot of the legislation for the recognition of digital assets in the U.S. states of Wyoming and California.
Wow. Very cool, guys. Obviously, a super accomplished, competent team. And just, because this is kind of a technical deep dive, I was wondering, maybe you could just give us a picture of the rest of the technical team that's not kind of present here today. And the reason I think I asked this is I just think it's interesting for people to hear the kind of roles that are required for a project like this. And as kind of executive members of this team, how you guys think about what a project like this needs.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. So I'll mention a few key members of our tech team. So our first technical hire, actually, our VP of Engineering, Tila Ochada, He was formerly an architect at Immutable X, as well as Block Party, along with his PhD in computer science. Thilo actually has built real high-frequency trading systems in the past. He has a TradFi background as well. So for us, I mean, he was just the perfect fit early on. Started to help us building the infrastructure and the architecture the right way in the very early days. And we have, I think, over 50,000 lines of code committed now, and that infrastructure is very, very mature for a company at this stage. We're really proud of that.
Yeah,
this is something that, you know, we're not going to have to rewrite it in 6 months. This can scale as it's written. It's very fast, very performant, and very modular. In fact, the whole thing, I think we're doing some stats on it today. It only runs in like 30 megabytes of memory. Like you could run this thing on your smartphone.
wow.
So really cool. Want to mention Don McCarty as well. He's our head quant and a developer as well. So he comes from Goldman Sachs, has this kind of pedigree background and the understanding from the client side. So for us, in addition to being a great coder, he helps us to really kind of think like a trader and really kind of get the full picture and solve some of the tougher problems on the back end. I don't want to go through every member of our tech team.
Yeah,
but what I will say is that, you know, these guys are all full time. They've all got skin in the game, and they're all high conviction. And this is something that we've done from really early on to try to kind of build that strong company culture.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have had the pleasure and the luxury of working with you guys and getting to know the team, and it's a really, really well-rounded, strong, super competent team. Like, I know you guys are going to really, really build some amazing things, and so it's probably a good point just to kind of get into the product a little bit. And for anyone listening that might not be familiar with Deepwaters, just sort of a high-level overview of what the project is, kind of what problems it's trying to solve, maybe what separates it a little bit from other things that might look like it, you know, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I can probably start here. We really, our mission can be defined by three core principles, those being fairness, transparency, and provability. And we mean that in every dimension possible, from the technology to the principal management of the team to our external auditing and our engagement with the community. And we really founded this project while seeing the kind of exploitation that takes place on behalf of exchanges and how traders are exploited and how assets and custody is abused in many cases. And quite honestly, when we started, we had a little bit of pushback, and we were being asked the question, you know, how realistic are the problems that you have been identifying? And in one way, we've been validated, and in another way, it's been really unfortunate that we've been validated by Voyager, Three Arrows Capital, Celsius, and of course now FTX have really shown that the problems we initially identified and we've been building around for over a year and a half now really are the problems that need most to be solved. So we solve these problems, very broadly speaking, in three ways. Number one, we have built a technology in which the tech itself, the code, prevents anyone, including ourselves, from engaging in the kind of malfeasance, rehypothecation, fraud, corruption that all of these other cases that I just mentioned have. All trades are completely confidential to all parties. That means they're again, including us, that means they're immune from PFOF, internal netting, adverse selection, and any other kind of malfeasance or manipulation with the actual trade flow until they are published to a public order book. So no party has informational advantage over any other. So the first was to build a technology where no one had that advantage, including ourselves. So even if we wanted to take advantage of the custody or assets or trade flow of our customers, we couldn't if we wanted to. The second was to create a system where anybody could check our claims. You don't need to believe us. You should, quite honestly, any exchange that you hear pitched to you as a retail trader, you should be very skeptical. I mean, you guys have been burned, as I have, again and again and again, and you should ask any exchange that you place faith in your assets into to prove to you that your trade flow, your assets, the custody on which you place your faith and credit is being handled in the way that that you want it to. And we have built a system where all of our trade rules are public, and you as an individual trader, without any special permissions, without any need to know coding or any special knowledge at all, can verify that those trades are being executed in the way that they have been laid out in our trade rules. And then through a public order book, you can see that all of those trade rules were in fact executed like we say they were. So again, you don't need to trust our claims. You don't need to trust any of the propaganda. You can see for yourself exactly how your assets are handled, how the trade flow is being executed, and how the entire system works. There's no question about how on the back end, your assets, if they're being rehypothecated or repositioned for other use cases like an FTX, you can actually see what's going on. And that's incredibly important to our mission and the proposition of our technology. And the third point is engagement of external auditors. So even though we let anybody in the system audit and validate how the system works ourselves, we're engaging with external auditors for our code base, our trade flow, and our asset management on day one, to really have the highest level of assurances on par with the highest requirements in traditional finance. And although we're not going to have this on day one, eventually we're going to be doing monthly financial audits and or monthly financial reports and quarterly financial audits from one of the big four consulting firms, which again are the highest standards you're even going to find in traditional finance and much higher than anything you're going to find in DeFi. So we want to, one, create a system in which it's impossible for us to do all the shady things that these other exchanges have been involved in. Two, give you, the retail trader, the ability to check those claims. And three, engage with third-party validators and auditors to provide that additional level of assurance on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I hate to say it, and I don't think this was obviously something that was planned by you guys, but something like this in exchange with better transparency, better proof of reserves in the face of what's been going on in the last 6 months, it couldn't come at a better time. And obviously you guys have been working on this for a long time, and I don't think anyone anticipated the kind of fraud and nonsense that we saw over the past couple of months. So, outside of hey, we're just here to protect people from fraud, you guys obviously had something that was pulling you toward this vision prior to the most recent news. And I'm just kind of wondering what that was for you guys, outside of, listen, crypto's open, it's transparent, just sort of building toward these kind of ethos. What was the driver that had you guys say this is really the most important direction for this exchange, a year to 2 years ago?
Yes. I believe that possibly was my trading career. I started really early. I'm going to date myself. I still remember picking up the phone and placing a trade, then picking up the phone and checking on that trade.
Wow.
So yeah, I remember all of it. And when E-Trade came along, so all of the things that are going on in crypto right now, we really didn't invent it, right? It's just we took that from traditional finance and then we leveraged it because it's Wild West and it's not very supervised. My heroes were the guys that started IEX. The first people to actually take a stand. And for those who do not know, it was a clever little idea. They rolled up a few miles of fiber optic cable in the closet to slow down their own execution, to make sure that to prevent front running, not to get too technical there. That really inspired me. And long after I stopped trading, I took a look at crypto and I saw something in it that gave me hope to be able to overcome it. And long story short, we looked at the four following privileges that crypto actually got from traditional finance, and those are order flow blocking, such as GameStop. You know that story, right? Turning off the buy button for GameStop, or turning off the sell button for USD. Actually, we're not very big fans of turning off the withdrawal button, which is the custody issues. Order flow change, insertion, reordering, deletion. Not everybody will agree, but I personally and many on the team do not believe that MEV is the best way or the most fair way of discover price, perhaps, and order information leakage, such as access to the order flow. Of course, we've all of us became very incensed to know that Alameda had the privileged access, but actually it's nothing new. It happens every day in traditional finance, and of course in crypto. So those were trying to address these issues in the way where we don't play God, we don't get privileged access, and you don't have to trust us. That was the main impetus here. Took a long time. There were some pivots, but here we are.
Yeah. And Michael, something you said earlier was a little interesting to me, and that you guys actually got like pushback. Now, was that from community, kind of investors, just early people that you were talking to around the project? That was, and was the pushback that these kind of weren't necessarily important issues?
I think we've been developing primarily in stealth for the first year or so. So not as much community, but definitely some of the investors and some of the experts that, quote unquote, experts that we were talking to at the beginning, we were called a little bit of conspiracy theorists. And my response to that is, even if you don't know what's going on, if all of your neighbors are building walled gardens, it's not unreasonable to be asking why and what are they hiding. And we believe that the best approach to any of this is complete transparency and no fine print. You know exactly how much money we make. We make money on trading fees, and that's it. You're not going to see any fine print in the user license agreement for Deepwaters. You're not going to see any qualifications that we offer you. You can do the math and figure out exactly how much we make. Our fees are on par with the absolute lowest of centralized exchanges. And, simplicity is in my view anyway, the end all and be all. And when all of the institutions that are defining a space are opaque and very complex to the point that most of the people who are actually trading on these platforms don't understand how their trades are being executed, potentially manipulated, and how those exchanges are making money off the individual traders, that's a problem. And I don't think it's unreasonable or irrational to ask why when your neighbors start building those walls.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think most everybody can agree that better transparency, more accountability, these things are all good, right? But they're hard. Building them is hard. And so I want to understand within the Deepwaters architecture, right? Where is some of the real innovation happening here to achieve these things in your guys' kind of estimation and opinion? What about the way that you're building this, or what you're building, is in fact really new?
Yeah. So the key innovation is marrying CeFi and DeFi technology together. So actually, I'm sharing something with you now, Mark, if we want to hand over to it.
Sure.
So for us, the real tool behind the innovation here is something that's called confidential computing, or trusted execution environments. And this is a technology that's been around for a long time. In fact, it's in your smartphone. This is kind of the hardware that protects your Face ID or your fingerprints. And it has two really important properties that allowed us to kind of deliver our mission here. The first of which is that data and memory is encrypted. And what that means is that you can effectively create something of a black box that no one can see inside of, including ourselves. Now, the second property is something that's called remote attestation. And what that means is that even though I've got this black box here, with remote attestation, I can prove what software, what applications, and what operating system is running inside of that black box. So for us, we open source that code and the business logic that lies around how do we match trades, how do we custody assets, and what's happening behind the scenes. And that remote attestation allows anyone to come in and basically validate that, yeah, this business logic, this fair trading and custody done the right way is exactly what's happening here. Now, the cool thing about this is, we're effectively running things like a centralized exchange. That means that we can be fast, we're performant, we're gas free on the trade side. But at the same time, we come with a lot of the features that come with a typical DeFi project, the reason that we're all here, right? So we have this idea of transparency and trustlessness. So for us, you can see here in the center of the diagram, we have basically our back end. We call these our Deepwaters nodes. So we're going to be setting these up in a raft-based consensus, which basically is a leader-follower system that helps us to have a little bit more crash fault tolerance, as well as regional discrepancies. We can switch that leader between various locations to avoid people getting too close to the exchange and taking advantage of latency. And we also communicate directly with the blockchain, so we're listening for on-chain events. And we have a whole new paradigm, which basically allows a user to sign all of their orders with their Web3 wallet, if they so choose, to add another layer of security on top of the exchange, which basically ensures that no one can create actions on your behalf unless they have access to your private key. So then over here off the right, we have our validator network. These are the guys that, in our case, the validator are the ones that subscribe to that remote attestation and basically prove and shout from the rooftops that, yeah, Deepwaters is doing what they say they're doing.
Very cool. So what I think is interesting about this is, when you think about crypto in general, smart contracts, when people talk about Bitcoin, they talk about, how verifiable it is. You can look and prove it to yourself, right? But what you guys are doing here that I think is fascinating and certainly where the industry is likely going is making more parts of the business open and verifiable, down to the business logic and the rule sets and how you guys actually own and operate this exchange. Like it's a deeper layer of transparency beyond just, hey, here's the smart contract, really, which kind of just handles this one part of the protocol or business. There's all this other stuff happening in the background that is invisible, right? So it's not really as transparent as it may look or feel. And it seems like you guys are kind of building toward this vision of a world where much more of the business is exposed and verifiable. And is that sort of how you guys look at it?
That's right. And what we're really trying to do is take away the points of control that typically exist on the exchange side by putting all of this on the technology layer and making it all immutable and provable. We don't have the power to do some of the things that some of the other exchanges have been getting away with for years.
Right.
And I do want to also mention there are a few other projects in the space that are building on TEE. So Avalanche, who happens to be one of our investors through the Blizzard Fund, the new bridge implementation on the Avalanche network is actually built using a TEE node infrastructure very similar to ours. And in fact, the founder of Avalanche actually built something called TEE chain. You can look it up in the past, which was a TEE enabled blockchain that was able to get over 1 million transactions per second. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. And obviously there's parts of this that are on-chain and off-chain, and those decisions, are the result of like optimal trade-offs, right? And I'm hoping you guys can talk a little bit about what parts of this are on-chain, what parts of it are off-chain, and why, like what's the hierarchy there and the decision-making process, because obviously it's a challenging one and it's a really delicate balance. And I think how you reason through that and think through these things is pretty fascinating.
Sure. So I can probably start here. The way we prioritize those decisions is always going to be in the interest of transparency, accountability, provability, and the fidelity of trading. So I'll hand this over to Greg. He can get a little bit deeper into the technology. But at the end of the day, we believe that trustlessness was the core of the ethos of DeFi, and that has been lost on many exchanges and many of the institutions that have now become standard. And we wanted to come back to that through whatever means that we can. So Greg, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the technical decision making.
Yeah. So as far as most of the day-to-day exchange operations, so matching of orders, for example, are happening off-chain inside of this TEE architecture. Specifically, the stuff that's happening on-chain, we facilitate all of our deposits and withdrawals on-chain. So you can see a vault always in real time that stores all of our assets. Also, we do have a token at Deepwaters. There are some features that are built in on chain there, as well as future products. So we're going to be releasing some tokens in the future, which I don't want to tell too much about in this call, but we think that they're pretty exciting. And the really cool thing is, like, with this architecture that we have, we can create true parity between those tokens across chains. So the native bridge that we have through Deepwaters and through the TEE allows, like, these tokens to basically have the same, let's call it counterparty risk, for lack of a better word. Like, they can all really be treated exactly the same and can move back and forth freely between chains.
Okay. Well, and I think that's kind of a good transition to the next question I wanted to ask, which is about just the multi-chain architecture of all of this stuff. Because, if you go to the website, if you read through the documentation and listens to you guys talk about the project, it becomes very obvious that this isn't really a chain, a specific project. You guys you want to be able to capture all of the value across multiple ecosystems. But, just in the sort of spirit of understanding how this is built, like you said, Avalanche is one of your investors, for example. How much of this is, like, let's say, built on Avalanche? In what ways do you interact with other ecosystems? Is it simply through the assets that are hosted there? How do you guys look at multi-chain for Deepwaters?
Yeah, so any blockchain that we end up supporting, we need to create some kind of an on-chain endpoint to handle all the vaults and the balances, and to kind of have that that signing paradigm that allows us to do this kind of safe deposit and withdrawal. Outside of that, we are using Avalanche, particularly the C chain, to do some special things. So we're managing that any of the tokens that we are offering, that what I was just talking about before. So like our WTR token that's coming out, and then some of those future tokens, we're managing some of the collective state on the Avalanche C chain. So, for example, you'll have your overall supply, and then this idea of minting and redeeming on other systems, but kind of the master is happening on Avalanche C chain. But for us, like, we are a chain agnostic solution. We can support any public ledger. We have to tie into their on chain. We have to make a vault on chain, and then we have to tie our backend infrastructure to be able to pick up on chain events. But once we do that, then you can support any ERC20 or token in that respective ecosystem and trade it freely on our exchange.
Got it. Very cool. And at launch, is there any ecosystem that you guys, in addition to Avalanche, that are kind of paying closer attention to than others that you anticipate will bring more volume? I think there's, you're only so many people. You only focus on so many things. And I'm curious, outside of Avalanche, what other chains you think will have a larger presence within your ecosystem?
Yeah, so obviously top of mind is Ethereum, right? We are starting out just in means of mitigating risk and starting off in our first launch a little bit more contained. It's all EVM compatible chains in the beginning. So we're talking about Ethereum mainnet, Avalanche C chain, BNB chain, Polygon proof of stake, and basically all of the tokens on those ecosystems are fair game for us right off the bat. But the EVM paradigm is very easy to build on. So we are in talks with a few other projects. We're obviously interested in things like the Polkadot ecosystem. So Moonbeam would be a project there. The Near ecosystem, Near is actually, they gave us a grant and we're very supportive of our project. So we're going to be integrating Aurora shortly thereafter. So for us, I think we're going to go after some of those bigger ecosystems that have an EVM compatible solution, first and foremost. And then we're going to start looking at other native ecosystems like the Cosmos ecosystem and beyond. Anywhere that matters, really. What our customers want to see, as long as we feel that it's safe, we're interested in pursuing.
Right. Okay. So, well, what was it then that made you guys land on Avalanche? Considering all these chains are EVM based, what was it about this blockchain, this ecosystem, that had you guys kind of plant a flag here, so to speak?
Yeah. So there were a few things for sure. Certainly, we did find it interesting that they had this kind of history with TEE in their company.
Okay.
They understand what we're doing, but more than that, they're taking a really strong stance on the idea of subnets, and we think that there is potentially a future here for a Deepwater subnet as well. So we felt very comfortable with that. There's a strong community developing there, and frankly, just in terms of scalability, this is a good alternative, to something like Ethereum mainnet, where every transaction is quite costly. So we did look at a few options, but we felt Avalanche was just right.
Okay.
Also, they are the strongest ecosystem that invested in us.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we obviously, are a little biased, but there's a reason. There's a reason for that bias, right? There has to be something that keeps that momentum going day to day, and we certainly find that in Avalanche, both from like a technical and community perspective. That's for sure. In listening to you guys talk about this and think about the features of this DEX, I wonder why something like this hasn't been built before, right? Like obviously you have fragments of this across different products, but as a cohesive suite, right? Something like this doesn't really exist. And do you think that has been because of technical limitations, or like to your point earlier, maybe there wasn't a clear need for it? I'm just wondering why Deepwaters, as you guys envision it, doesn't already exist. If you have any thoughts around that.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, this just come to light. We were considered conspiracy theorists about a year ago. Every time we pitch it, people simply wouldn't believe us. There was not much market demand.
That's incredible.
Right. However, as I was saying, GME, right, that was kind of the first flash of truth. Also, the incumbents were not really interested in changing the status quo. It's a very, very profitable status quo for the participants. Yeah. Even though in crypto, and that's a rather lengthy technical conversation with crypto, a lot of market makers do need us, particularly even the largest ones. Since now, the conversation has been started around custody in particular. You can see that there was a lot of, even I think Vitalik did an AMA recently on that.
The words proof of reserves have been repeated by most every exchange in the last couple of months for a reason.
Right.
So it's definitely happening. We're definitely becoming more relevant, and we feel like we have no peers at the moment in terms of the purity of our intent here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's like unfortunate circumstances. A lot of people had to get burned to get here, but really, really great timing for you guys, quite frankly.
Michael likes to say we were validated by an apocalypse.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a good way to put it. But again, you guys have been working on this for a really long time, and you guys have had like a really robust, kind of long-standing testnet. Obviously, like an important milestone and feature to have before going to mainnet. Could you tell us a little bit about that testnet? And what the purpose of testnets are, and specifically maybe what you guys learned from running your testnet, things you weren't expecting, and just kind of how it improved the final product.
Yeah, sure. So obviously the purpose of testnet is to put your product in front of real users. For us, all of us in the company primarily are DeFi power users and traders. I wouldn't say that we're regular people, right? We need to put this in front of the world and really let them stress test it. So that's exactly what we did. We went to testnet September 1st, had an incredible reception, and it's helped us learn a lot as a company and kind of shape the product before launching the real thing, right? Maybe Michael, I could turn it over to you. I mean, we've had just an incredible reception at testnet, and it's something that we'd love to brag about here a little bit.
Yeah, our community has blown us away so far. So we did, as Greg said, launch our testnet in September, and so far we've had over 140,000 unique wallets log into that testnet. And we've done a couple very small scale airdrops, but nothing. I mean, no major giveaways, no major incentive programs that you'd see with a lot of other launches. And our community has just been incredibly supportive. At our base, and I do want to touch on this because I don't think we emphasized it during the product. Our hybrid technology gives us many of the advantages you would expect of both centralized and decentralized exchanges. So as I touched on earlier, zero MEV and front running potential at all, zero slippage, zero internalization, internal netting, PFOF, adverse selection. Adverse selection for me, Greg and Zorrik were certainly more of traders than I was. I guess I get to be the token most normal person on the team, even though I am kind of a rocket scientist and sort of maybe not as typical, but I always just thought I was really bad at trading and understanding the mechanism on which adverse selection functioned, and knowing that when I place a trade and it seemed like the market magically went in the opposite direction that I was hoping as soon as my trade executed, like that's it by intent, right? Like that's by design, and it almost doesn't matter what exchange you trade on. I was seeing this kind of behavior exhibited on my trades, and of course those trades were only being executed when it was most advantageous to that exchange, when they effectively could see the future, and which is what adverse selection is. And that's the point that really drove home to me how this is impacting individual traders. But we have had over 85,000 people now join our Discord, over 46,000 in our Twitter. We've had 300,000 comments in our TestNet feedback channels. We've had memes and content created. We've promoted a number of members of our community to part or full-time staff. The community response has just been incredible. And I think what is most fulfilling to me, and I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of our team here, is it's not just this best of both worlds proposition that are getting people excited. We do see people talking about zero gas and zero slippage at the same time, and zero front running, but it's really this proposition of true transparency, accountability. You know how the trades are being executed. You don't have to trust us. You know how your assets are being handled. Proof of everything. And that's what has really been the thing that I think has gotten most of our community excited. And that's what's most exciting to us, because that's what we care about most as well. And we truly can't wait to see what all of you bring in the future. And we know that one of the most important things to the community who's going to be listening here are introduction of new tokens. And we're going to be looking to you to help us identify, reach out to, connect with the projects who have the most exciting projects, who are based on the right principles, who are not trying to rug anyone, who are building with real purpose and real teams and real value and real utility. We want all those tokens listed on Deepwaters, and we hope that you're going to help us make that happen.
And what actually Michael doesn't take credit for, but it blows my mind, is how international that community has become.
Yep.
It's actually not easy for a project coming out of the United States to become so. And last time I counted, there's something like 24 languages, many countries.
28.
28, thank you. That's new. I think it's very important. So we found sort of a universal language here. Everybody wants to be respected as a trader, as a human being. Everybody likes fairness, and that unified the community.
Yeah, that's certainly something that resonates with most people for sure. And this is like the kind of thing that I think most crypto projects like to talk about, like to say, but it oftentimes doesn't actually show up in the product and in the project. And it's kind of what I appreciate so much about what you guys are doing, is it almost doesn't matter what you say. All of this stuff there's been such a good faith effort to make it open and verifiable. One of the things I think that actually might be interesting to kind of talk about, and I think people listening would want to go back to it, was this concept of, was it adverse selection? Yeah. So I think everybody sort of knows that feeling of like getting the courage to like place a trade only to have the market seem like it moves immediately against you. This is actually something that I hadn't heard of before, and I'm just kind of curious to learn more. Is this something that happens over the course of like microseconds in exchange software. It's sort of like, traders don't really know what's happening. What is this exactly?
Sure.
That's a Zorrik question.
So this is something that is not well known. It's just sort of, and we have the privilege of educating people on this as of late. I like to say that Deepwaters replaces adverse selection with natural selection. So you should be the one responsible whether or not you have any money left at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So ultimately, this has to do with other concepts such as internalization, as well as information asymmetry. So I'll start with information asymmetry and explain why it is bad. So information asymmetry is when a few players or a single player, as it was in FTX phase, gets to see the market before anybody else. And that means that they know where the market is going. That allows them to trade with impunity. That combined with the right of first refusal, or the right of first look, allows you to ensure that the people against whom you're trading are experiencing adverse selection. Now, combine that with internalization, which is when a large wholesaler essentially absorbs the orders and matches them against their own assets, and various idiosyncrasies of timing and execution, that essentially creates a situation where you start losing money the second you get filled. And it is not actually our assumption or assertion. There's a lot of research been done ever since UK and Australia disallowed and made payment for order flow illegal. So a lot of academia have written quite a bit of papers, and they have quantified the adverse selection, basically saying that it's 90% more likely to happen in traditional finance. And if you look at DeFi, because of the issues of timing, so let's say if your exchange is slower than anybody else, Binance is about 13 times slower than we are, for instance. If the price discovery is
sorry to cut you off. Slower in what regard? Slower how?
Round trip. So you
meaning...
place an order to the placement of the order, to arrival of the order. It goes deeper and deeper. I'm a geek on this. I can talk for hours and hours. There's things like privilege cancellation rights which play into this. There's a lot of dirty business going on. But the easiest example is let's say in DeFi, where the price discovery is essentially being done by front running, or even market makers presenting the price for you as a sort of take it or leave it, let's say hash flow. And you can understand how a market maker giving you a specific price would result in you starting to lose money the second that you accept.
Right.
Because their business is not directional. Their business is rent seeking.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just curious.
So to give a very practical example, adverse selection happens. I always, Zorrik can give you more context, and he certainly has more trading experience, good and bad, than I think any of us on the team ever will. But adverse selection happens when there is information that buyers or sellers have that other buyers or sellers do not. So if $1 billion order is placed on another major centralized exchange, that exchange knows what the price of the token is going to be doing after that order is placed. Obviously, the price of one is going to go up and the price of another is going to go down if it's a trade between two different tokens. And they can place other orders relative to that. They can shift the order flow and adversely select orders that are not either placed by themselves or some of their best friends, privileged parties, their market makers, to advantage themselves and their friends, and to disadvantage traders who do not have that privilege.
And a handy term for this, what Michael just described, is toxic flow. Toxic flow is advantage in information and or speed.
Yeah. Okay.
So if $1 billion order was placed on Deepwaters, until it hit the public order book and everyone saw it at once, literally we wouldn't have any idea. But using the tool that Greg described, remote attestation, everybody can see how that order is being executed, and then after the fact see that there was no adverse selection, toxic order flow, manipulation, anything like that was going on.
Okay. So when you guys are talking about a user's ability to verify this stuff, and when I think about users, I just automatically think of kind of like the most common everyday man or woman that you could imagine, right? And the transparency sort of topic is definitely made its way into the mainstream at this point, right? You're seeing SPF and FTX on CNBC every night, and so anyone that's like likely to get into crypto at this point is going to be aware of these things, right? So they're going to be drawn to an exchange, a centralized exchange that talks about these things. Now, earlier in the conversation, you talked about a user's ability without any kind of special knowledge to verify some of these things, and these are complex topics, right? So I want to understand as really practically, like as a user, how do I go about checking into some of these things, right? Because this is the real value to a user is being able to verify without necessarily any kind of special knowledge or tools. So, we don't have to cover necessarily everything, but I'm really interested in the practical examples of how someone might check Deepwaters, right? Like I'm a user. I don't know necessarily a lot about crypto. I just know that I don't want to get screwed. This is the exchange that's talking about not screwing me. How do I verify that?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, remote attestation is a proof of what is running inside of our backend. So for us to make that digestible, it's releasing our code, of course, and trying to provide a description of what it's doing and the business logic behind it. Now, ultimately, this is like, this is why open source software is a good thing. You have a lot of eyes on it, a lot of independent people trying to break it. And I don't expect that everyone is going to be able to read the code and understand it fully. So to make this easy in the beginning, we're focusing on validators that have a name and trust in the space. People like Anchor, for example, right? They're a big validator. They've been operating a great business for a long time. We're going to be engaging them as one of our early validators and one of these people that's kind of shouting from the rooftops on our behalf. But over time, we want to add more functionality here. We want, we want to make this process more and more open. But you can't do everything all at once.
Sure.
This is something we're always going to work to improve.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think that is a huge step, right? I would never underestimate the public's ability at this point to dig in when someone opens this up, right? Like it's maybe not a perfect solution, but it's a really good one, and I think it's miles ahead of where we've been. And again, just really appreciate like the way in which you guys build towards these solutions. And you're just kind of getting back to maybe some of like the simpler concepts here. Things like zero fees, zero slippage. These are like really kind of attractive propositions. And I'm wondering how you technically achieve them, right? So how does a decentralized exchange offer something like no fees? How do you advertise zero slippage?
So I do want to make a clarification here, a distinction. Sure. We do charge trading fees.
Yeah.
So this is similar to when you get onto Coinbase and you make a trade. What we don't have are gas fees associated with all those trades because they're happening in that TE environment. Now the part about the no slippage, it's really just what you see is what you get. So when you place an order, you're taking a bite out of the order book, and that's all there is to it. There's no funny business, no reordering, all the things that Michael and Zorrik were waxing about earlier. They just simply don't happen here, and we're really very proud of that.
And not to take credit where credit not due, order books don't really have slippage per se, right? We're an order book. However, we do have something we're very proud of, and that is viability of market orders. So our market orders actually land on the order book directly without anyone being able to see them, including ourselves, or preempt them, or withdraw the market orders, which withdraw the orders that are waiting to be executed, which is called flashing. So there's no slippage. So market orders get translated into almost a limit order at the current bid and ask, depending on whether you're buying or selling.
Got it. Okay, so this actually relates a lot more to just the transparency and the verifiability of the order book, right? So like what you see is what you get, and you can anticipate the slippage.
Well, there because everyone has all the information at once, and to be a little pedantic here, it is true that we have a number of different, call them nodes, different execution points, and your physical proximity to that will give you a very, very small advantage in information for your availability to that public order book. But we do randomize that execution very, very regularly. I'm not sure if we've defined the exact period of time. So even though you might have a 1 or 2 millisecond advantage on one trade, on the next trade, you're going to have a 1 or 2 millisecond disadvantage.
Okay.
Actually, this is an interesting point. What Michael's talking about here is randomly rotating our geographically distributed leader nodes. Yeah, and that's almost, so my heroes at IEX, I'm trying to one-up them and introduce something better and more complex. And so this is our answer to that. There's a poor ROI or ROR on trying to cozy up to a particular node or a particular set of nodes, because we can move them at any time, and we also rotate them randomly.
That's very, very, very cool. So what about the token itself? What is a token's role in all of this? What is the token's utility, and what can people do with it?
Yeah, sure. So our WTR token, we want this to be something that you can always spend on goods and services in the platform. Everything from trading fees to subscriptions and basically benefits and features that are exclusive to token holders. We also want to allow our audience and our community to engage us and kind of steer the path forward. So when we make decisions about what tokens are we supporting next, what ecosystems are we supporting next, we want community involvement, and even in terms of what features we're going to build. So we see this as one of the main drivers of the token, outside of just being able to spend it in the platform as well. I do want to also note this is something that we use for our validators. So if you are a registered validator, we're going to be compensating you with the token as well. And there's a bonding mechanism there, which you can read a little bit about in our white paper when it's released.
Okay. Initially, the validator set is something that, at least as far as I sort of understand, is something that's like more tightly controlled. And it sounds like this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, something that's going to be opened up a little more at some point. For someone that might be interested in how that works, or even potentially validating, what can you tell us about that for someone that's looking toward the future?
So the goal here, this is one of the beautiful things about remote attestation. It's actually a pretty simple procedure, and it's really lightweight. So the goal here is that really anyone that wants to run a client can run a client, and a lot of the complexities and the difficulties around, let's say, hosting an Ethereum node are not really going to be present here. This is something that someone could run from their house and really without any kind of risk. So that's really what we're going for. Initially, we're just starting off. So we're going to start off, focusing on a few big trusted names in the space, but eventually the goal is to open this up to everyone. And it's not a far leap for us either.
Yeah. Very cool.
I'd love to piggyback off this point and mention, following up from your question earlier about remote attestation and how we're going to make that available to everyone. We are currently in the process of building that UX, and that's going to be a tough process, is making that, and it is going to be iterative, making that more and more and more accessible to a wider audience. And part of that is a perfect example of the kind of value that our community has been bringing us so far. Not only have we been blown away by the size of our community, but we've been very proactive in really accepting and working with our community for that kind of input. So not only have our community members been making memes and helping our community grow and getting the word out, but the input that they have provided has been invaluable. I mean, we would not be where we are now if not for the input and help from our community, and the continued help and support of our community will be absolutely vital to making this as successful as we all want it to be. And we've been really proactive and done as much as we can. We hope that our community listening to this agrees in rewarding and recognizing those who do put in that help. We see our community as part of our team. and in a very real, practical, tangible way. So a lot of these questions that you've been asking are questions that our community is going to help us solve.
Yeah.
So that's, this is not just lip service. Like we really truly believe that the best product is one that has the most eyes and the most voices. And we don't believe, none of us is ever going to be smarter than, 40,000 or 100,000 people involved in our community. And that really has been, one of the pieces that has helped us get as far as we have so far.
And I also would say that, this is also part of our attempt to restore the faith in DeFi and also to deliver on some of the promises that have been made a long time ago. And one of these promises, and that is what attracted me personally into the space, is democratization. So here's the democratization of oversight. You be the SEC, right? So this is the distributed sort of auditing, the crowdsourcing auditing, real-time auditing of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big promise, and delivering on these promises are hard. It's incredibly complex, and I think most people don't realize quite how hard what you guys are actually trying to do is. And just to kind of follow along on this line of thinking, when you're looking at security, right? We've been talking a lot about just general transparency, right? But at some point, the onus falls on you guys to secure this and make it safe for users. How do you approach securing a system this complex, whether it's through like OPSEC or auditing? How do you even begin?
Yeah, so separation of concerns, separation of services, and good forward-thinking architecture is a big part of the solution here. Audits, like you mentioned, so we are engaging FYEO as well as QuantStamp for audits. But this is going to be a continuing process, right? As we improve and build on the platform, we always want to make sure we have more eyes. But just the nature of open source helps us too. And this is also a function of TestNet. But for us, it's just about moving at the right speed and just building things the right way from the ground up. Separation of concerns is king.
I think it's worth saying we have been developing for over a year and a half now. And we were in stealth for about a year, and we've been now about 4 months in testnet. And we've really tried to build this a lot more like a traditional technology company than one of your, I'm not going to name anything specific, but one of your crypto hype projects. We want to do this right. And part of that is spending a lot of time on the code, making sure that our community has eyes on it, making sure that we get the most, as Greg said, out of the open source architecture. The great thing about true democracy, the worst thing about true democracy is voters. The best thing about true democracy is voters.
Got it. Well, one of the other things I wanted to make sure that we talked about today, at least to kind of dig into a bit, was the bridge, right? Because it sounds like you guys have kind of actually a unique and interesting history around the bridge and the solution and the code there. So what can you tell us about the bridge and how it's built and why you built it that way and how it might compare to like other sort of common solutions?
I would say the closest comparison would be Avalanche's bridge at this point. For us, the emphasis is really on the fact that we're bridging our own tokens. As far as like, bridging different kinds of tokens into our ecosystem, so let's say different versions of Ethereum, we're really going to focus on supporting the native tokens in the beginning. We believe that, until the bridging problem is solved in a greater way, we want to minimize risk for all of our users, and we're encouraging people to use the native assets. But in terms of the bridge for our tokens, where we are, it is all kind of built into the Deepwaters backend anyway, and taking advantage of this TEE. The coolest part is the fact that you have true parity, and you can move in between chains smoothly, and you can have kind of a collective state that's shared between them, which is really cool.
And so for maybe someone that doesn't understand a ton about bridges and maybe just kind of the basics, is the Deepwaters bridge, are there assets on on one chain that are just like simply represented on another? Like how do you do accounting across blockchains, and maybe like what do you mean when you talk about a TEE?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest risk of any kind of a bridge is that that no man's land between chains. So the moment that you transfer an asset from one blockchain to another, you have to trust someone in the middle space there. So for us, what we're trusting is a trusted execution environment, in particular Intel SGX. So this is that black box that we were talking about before, where we can open up the application that's running inside as far as the source code and the business logic, show that to the world, and let them prove that what we say is happening is happening. So when we're when we're taking control or custody of an asset, this is all very clear exactly how it's done. And I would say that's kind of the biggest risk and the biggest problem with all the other bridges as well. All these bridge hacks ultimately come down to someone got access to the private key, or there was some sharing of information that wasn't supposed to be shared.
Yeah.
In our system, you asked about representations of different tokens.
Right.
For us, all of that primary accounting is done on Avalanche C chain, and then the representations will be minted on the other chains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, bridges are tough, and it seems like basically every bridge gets hacked at some point. Avalanche's bridges not represented among that group, but yeah, I think this is one of the trickier things to do right. And with all the bridge hacks, what do you think? I mean, why do you think this is such a common problem? Like, it just feels like a sort of a matter of time before a bridge gets hacked. Why do you guys think that is?
It's the lowest hanging fruit, and
Yeah.
and human nature that really likes going after that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money
pretty strong,
concentrated in one space, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, is it bad security, kind of human error, like that leads to this being such a frequent occurrence? Is there anything that you can kind of generalize?
I would say
say
hybridization. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh no, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's the human element, right? The incentives are there. There's a lot of money locked up in a bridge potentially, and all it takes is a few bad actors, or just a lapse in security or judgment about where they're hosting the private key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the oracling issue, right? We all dealt with that before, and Link sort of solved it, but not really. Right, where the humans begin and code, and then code starts, and vice versa.
Right.
There's always a weak point, and that was, as you said, that was the most difficult part to overcome in our own project, and hence the technology, and hence we didn't trust ourselves to even oversee the technology, and we wanted the community to help us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, listen, I mean, you guys have been really, really generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. I kind of want to just end this on sort of what's next. I think you guys have a very, very clear and concise path to where you want to get, like a very coherent roadmap, and I want to understand, like, what is the next sort of big thing that you guys are tackling, and in terms of development or releases. What's next for Deepwaters?
Yeah, so our beta launch, trading real assets, is happening January 31st. Very, very excited about that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of the next year, we're going to focus on the TEE attestation part that you talked about before, and making this something that that everyone can participate in. Beyond that, we are looking at margin trading. So initially, we're starting out with spot trading, but we believe margin trading is something that people are interested in, and
Nice.
it's very exciting. And certainly, from a company perspective, we're interested in the revenue that comes with it, as long as you can do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, supporting new ecosystems and tokens, we have to get that short list and engage on it. So we have a good idea of who those front runners are right now. I don't want to announce them just yet, but stay tuned. I do want to give Michael an opportunity to do a shout out for us here, how people can follow the project and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to take part, we have a super active, and I know if I say Discord, there's going to be a not insignificant amount of you who are going to roll your eyes as I would have. We have an unbelievably mature, healthy community. Invite you to come check it out. Have over 85,000 people now in our Discord. Join us on Twitter, Deepwaters XYZ. You can access either of those just by www.deepwatersxy.xyz. You'll find links to all of our social media, Telegram as well. I'm not sure exactly when this interview is going to be available, but you'll be able to tell when it was recorded because about 4 hours from now, we're going to be announcing a bug bounty contest and a trading contest where you get to trade against other people on the testnet as well as members of our team with some pretty significant prizes and rewards. This is the first program we're doing with, I'm not going to say exactly yet, but rewards of that scale. We really want to reward our community and incentivize them to take part in this, help us stress test the system, help us test a lot of the new features that we've recently rolled out. So if you are a trader and you want to take part in the testnet to check us out, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to earn quite a bit of token, quite a bit of money. There's going to be a lot of opportunity in the bug bounties as well. We're really looking for you guys to help polish this thing as much as we possibly can before launch and thereafter. So those are going to be announced again in about 4 hours now. We hope to see as many of you as possible take part on that. And along with Avalaunch, we are doing a token sale. That's going to be on the 2nd of February. And the pre-sale with the run up to that is going to be the pre-sign up. Are going to start on the 15th of January. So those tokens, again, we're focusing pretty heavily on utility. On day one, they're going to be able to be used on the platform to discount trading fees. And shortly thereafter, we're going to be introducing quite a few more goods and services, hopefully in partnership with the community. So if any of you have more ideas about how we can be further utilizing our token on the platform, we're very happy to hear about that. We want to bring as much utility to it as possible. But we have a ton going on in the very near future, and we really do hope to see as many of you there as possible, and looking forward to hear all your feedback.
And if I may, a special shout out to algorithmic traders. This is my special favorite topic. We're actually doing a bit of research with RMIT. We believe that Deepwaters will allow you to see the type of returns that your back-tested strategies indicate. And if you're in the space and you study a bit about Deepwaters, you'll understand why I say that. So if you are an algorithmic trader, if you're on the bot, please come check us out.
There you go.
Please surprised.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Lots to sink into if you want to learn more and do more. And again, I really appreciate your guys' time today, and we'll be sure to do it again soon.